Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So we got some pretty interesting news about two topics that I think kind of are on a lot of people's minds from the official Marvel Snap Discord. So I figured we'd talk about those a little bit today. And the first of those is Aero on the watch list for the developers. And if you haven't heard about this already, Ben Brode has talked about it a bit in the past, but basically what the watch list means is, you know, if certain cards seem to be overperforming in win rate, cube rate, play rate, etc., they go on a watch list where they kind of experiment with ideas where if the card does continue to significantly overperform their standards for what they view as acceptable, what ways they can kind of potentially change the card to get it back in line with everything else in the game. So Steven replies with the eye emoji here, so I would take that as a pretty big indication that Aero probably is on their watch list. Worth noting that not every card that goes on a watch list ends up being changed. I think they've mentioned cards in the past have gone on the watch list, but then their play rate or win rate or cube rate has dropped back down to a more acceptable level over time, so the developers didn't actually have to make any changes. Now you can see here in the picture, and we had in the thumbnail, 6 power Aero. Do I think that's a change they would make to her? I'm not sure. The reason we have this at all is because that was actually what Aero was in the beta, was a 6 power card with the same effect, and right before global launch she got buffed to 8 power, then they nerfed her back down to 7, kind of in between like they did with Destroyer. So it's possible they could put her back down, but if they are going to make a change to this card, I think there are quite a few different ways they could do it. Do I personally think this card needs to be changed? Honestly, no. So I think the reason people get upset about Aero is because there aren't a lot of successful decks right now that are good at filling the board to the point where Aero can't just win the game if the opponent is ahead going into the final turn. Over time, some decks that were really good against Aero got weaker. One of the big ones is Zoo. Zoo was much more powerful in the beta, but a lot of the cards in the beta got nerfed, and now, you know, a couple months later after launch, the meta has changed a lot. We're having a lot of big point slam strategies be popular, like Shuri stuff. I think that's really contributing to Aero being a very dominant force in the meta. So I don't think Aero is necessarily a broken card. She is obviously very powerful, but I think there are symptoms surrounding the card that make it kind of more powerful than it would otherwise be. So for me, I don't think they should really change Aero. What I would like to see is I would like to see some way of buffing more swarm zoo kind of strategies that try and fill up their board, so that way there are more viable alternatives to play that don't just lose to a final turn Aero because they have the board spacing to do that. Now there are some decks that can succeed versus Aero. The big one to me is the Sarah control style deck, as that's able to slam a lot of things on the final turn. However, one of the most popular decks for Aero is Death Wave, and by using the wave effect, it's hard to kind of vomit all your things on the final turn, which is one of the ways we actually counter Aero. Zoo is another really good counter, but unfortunately, due to just how ridiculous Killmonger is at killing all the 1-drops, Zoo has had a very hard time existing, especially since beta, where a bunch of the powerful Zoo cards were nerfed. So I honestly would like them to revisit some of the nerfs they made in beta. It's been quite a while, and while some of those cards were a bit overtuned at the time, the power level of the game has gone up pretty significantly post-launch and with the addition of Series 4 and Series 5. So I wouldn't mind them revisiting nerfs to some cards like Angela or Bishop or some of the other cards like Mysterio that got changed when they were kind of, you know, a little bit of power outliers in beta or early launch. But now I don't really think those cards would be power outliers because the power level of the game has gone up since then. So those are some thoughts about Aero. Again, being on the watch list does not confirm a card is getting nerfed, but this is something good to be aware of. So nice that we saw this, and we'll have to keep an eye out for if they change this card in the future. One way I do think they could change it, if that's something they want to do, is bump it up to a 6-cost card, so you can't weave in a 1-drop or you can't pass into Aero She-Hulk. I really do think Aero has a valuable place in the game, for countering certain strategies, and I'd actually be kind of worried about things like Shuri a bit if Aero got hit pretty significantly. But we'll have to wait and see if she continues to overperform to a point where they feel like they need to change the card. But I think the better way to go about it is just kind of by buffing strategies that go wide, so Aero can't be as effective versus most of the common decks in the meta. Thanos is another one that actually is very good against Aero because it's one of the few decks that, because of the stones, can actually spam its board pretty effectively. But that's our first bit of news. Now we have another one here. So here, another message from Steven on the official Discord. This was in response to a question asking about the hot and featured locations. So those have been pretty hot topics. I know the recent one gave people a lot of grief. I thought it was going to be bad, but I ended up having a lot of fun with it, with the Space Throne. But I can definitely understand why people think that the current amount of time with these featured and hot locations is a bit too much and often takes away more enjoyment than it's adding to the game. So Steven's talking about they do read a lot of the feedback they get about this stuff, and that they have plans to shorten featured locations to 24 hours and may experiment with not having a hot location for a week or two at some point. So no exact time frame on when this is happening. It sounds like shortening the featured locations might happen sooner, while the other one is a bit more in the air, but I think this is a pretty good compromise. I personally think that sometimes these featured locations and hot locations can add a lot of fun to the game, but I think part of the reason there's a lot of frustration with it is more about the designs of the locations themselves rather than the fact that they're showing up so much. I think that they have too many restrictions on some of these new locations. I mean, we saw that last month where, like 3 out of 4 of the locations were just almost built for Death decks or Galactus decks, and it got a little old. And it got kind of frustrating for players who, just wanted to play their normal deck, and if they didn't adapt, they would be very much punished for it. And that often results in some players just choosing not to play the game while these are active, and that doesn't seem ideal. Doesn't seem ideal at all. So I do like the suggestion, or what he's saying here, that they're going to limit the featured location to 24 hours. I do think 48 hours, 2 days was a bit much, especially if the featured location was not one you were a fan of. So I think that's a really good change. And removing the hot location once in a while, where it's just a regular weekend, I think is good as well. I think there is still value in having, a hot location here and there, but I think people would be a lot less frustrated if it wasn't happening every weekend. It's worth noting these happen on Saturday nights, which for a lot of people is kind of prime gaming time. Have more time on the weekends when you're busy working during the week, so it can be kind of frustrating when you want to jam some Snap and you have to deal with the hot location you don't like. And the hot locations can be a bit more offensive because they are at a 60% rate, so they show up. It's only 20% more, but you really feel that increased rate of appearance. So I really am pretty happy to see this. I really very much enjoy doing the deck videos for the featured and hot locations. So personally, I wouldn't want them to go away permanently. And I think that this is kind of a nice middle ground where they're trying to make it take up less time during the week. This is a pretty significant change because it goes from essentially being 3 days a week where there's a featured or hot location to being at most 1 to 2 days. So that's a pretty good change. So I'm kind of excited to see this. The way he said it sounds like limiting the featured locations to 1 day is going to be coming sooner, while they are kind of thinking about, doing the hot location stuff off for a week or two. But that doesn't sound like it might come as soon, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But that's pretty much all the news we have for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below, but that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.